What is up, Tube users, and welcome back to another episode of Z to A. Today we are going into a blast from the very far past, Worms 1. Now, I have a lot of Worms games in my library, so this is probably what the series is going to be for the next few episodes or so, but I wanted to start out with the very first Worms game. This game I'd never actually played before. I was more into the later versions of Worms, but this game is definitely a blast from the 90s, and it doesn't really hold up as well, but I mean, I'm glad that I gave it a shot, and I'm glad I played through it, and I don't know if I'll play it again just because of how extremely difficult it was. I mean, it just took me back to like some of those old school games like Lion King or Battletoads, just absolutely brutal computers that you have to go up against. But I mean, just looking at the cutscenes and stuff, everything just feels so nostalgic for me. I did have an issue recording. I mean, it took me a while just to be able to record the actual video for it, and I couldn't for the life of me get audio to record for whatever reason. I'm not sure really what I could have done better, and I couldn't get it to go completely full screen, unfortunately. But so this is kind of the best you'll get. And yeah, so I mean, I'll just do voiceover with some of the old school nostalgic soundtrack from this game, because listening to it, I know I maybe played this game back in the day a couple of times. Like, I definitely remember this game, but when I heard this soundtrack for the first time in probably over 20 years, it definitely brought back some nostalgic aspects. But yeah, this game was absolutely brutal. I was playing as I forget what the team name was, but I think it was just like Team 1 or something. But I'm the gray team playing against the gold team, as it were, and they literally never missed a shot, and I just couldn't get the win down to save my life in this first game. I did end up doing better in some of the later games. I was able to understand what to do and stuff, but this first game just was absolutely brutal, and it was really kind of frustrating. Just like, you have to land every shot because they just don't miss. I mean, even with the wind and stuff, they just have an auto lock on for everyone, so it was really frustrating, and it definitely took me out of it for being in my first game. And like, the wind is absolutely brutal. I didn't fully understand it at first, but I kind of got the hang of it later on. But yeah, it is unforgiving wind, and there's not really much that I thought you could do with it. So I mean, I just tried my best, basically. But I mean, it definitely is cool to go back and see like the starting of this franchise that has really just branched out and been one of the more successful yet lesser known franchises. I mean, I think one of my most played games ever was Worms Revolution, which is the newer version, and I think probably the most improved upon version of Worms itself. And it's just really fun to go back and see the beginnings, and have it play on a modern computer. You know, like, this game came out in 1995, and it still runs really well. I mean, recording it's a different story, but it still runs really well. It still plays like a Worms game, so I mean, all the aspects are there. It's just there's no way to tune the PCs or the computers, NPCs in this game, and that's what kind of gets frustrating, because they just don't miss. And so if you miss one shot, you're basically dead, which is frustrating, but it just kind of goes to show how far things have come from 1995. But there are some cool things that I loved looking through this game. Like they have like a match statistics after each game that kind of just goes into the details of each match, which is kind of cool. The soundtrack for this game and for each level was great, and I'll definitely probably use some of the soundtrack just in other videos, probably just from how good it is, especially for 1955. You kind of think of like that time as being a time when you they started to upgrade from like the 16-bit 32-bit soundtracks and had it become more modern live studio songs. So this was kind of cool to see the start of that. And the cutscenes for this game just brought me back to watching Saturday morning cartoons, kind of just like you have the wacky sound effects, and it definitely feels like a Saturday morning cartoon watching them. Even though they're just like small, less than a minute cutscenes, they're really well done and really fun to watch. And so, I mean, this is probably a game that would best be played with friends because, I mean, the computers are just absolutely overpowered in this game. And I think you can play it on, like, the same thing. I mean, I know it was, like, a PlayStation game, so obviously you could play with other people, like, in person and stuff back then. But on computer, I'm not certain that you can. I would have to try and figure that out, and I feel like that's really the only way to play this game properly because it is just absolutely brutal. They just never miss, and it's really frustrating because like you can't change the wind or anything. You can't have like a no wind option. I try to look for that, and you just kind of have to make sure you land every single shot, or else and if you miss one, you're basically screwed, which is just goes to show like that was definitely a 90s thing. It's just having super overpowered computers and making games just impossible to beat. I mean, I remember just playing some of those games back then and just looking back, I have nostalgia for them, but going to them today just reminds me of how brutal gaming was back then. And I think just after playing this game for like 30 minutes, I probably won't come back to it just by myself. It may be fun with other people. I think it actually would be pretty fun with other people, but I doubt that multiplayer, like online, works in this game. So if I'm gonna play a Worms game, I would rather play one of the modern ones, which, I mean, they've just upgraded countlessly, right? So it's just better to play those games. But it is cool to see the startings of this franchise that has gone on to do so many different things. And we'll get into all of the different games. Well, I don't know if I have all of them, but we'll get into most of the Worms games. I think I got a bunch of them in like a bundle at one point for really cheap, so I have a lot of different Worms games. Most of them I haven't even played. Like this game I've never played, at least on Steam I've never played, so it was cool to go back to it. Definitely had a little bit of nostalgia, but yeah, it's just not a Worms game that holds up by today's standards, unfortunately. But I mean, it is cool to see that I can still play this game on a modern system and have really no troubles playing it, and just be able to get right into it. I mean, it's a super small game too. Like it was like 100 megabits or something, so it didn't take up much space in my drive. And just being able to go back to these games, I think, is really cool. I wish more studios had the capabilities for this, because there's just so many games that I played back in the day that were, I mean, like, I don't think this was a PC original. I feel like it was PlayStation game, but I could be wrong about that. But just being able to go back and play some of those games that I played, because it's tough to find like a old PlayStation or an old school original Xbox and find those games that you played back in the day and be able to play them. So it's cool to see that there is still a way to play some of them, but it is just a trip to see how tough gaming was back then and how much more laxed it is by today's standards, at least. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I mean, I'll let the rest of this game finish out. It's just a couple more turns or something like that. And I will catch you in the next one, which should be another part of the Worms franchise. I think I'm going to try and look at the dates of each of the games and try and play them in order. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Comment any other Worms games that you had enjoyed back in the day or have nostalgia for. And definitely make sure to subscribe for more content. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.